So, when you're working out, there's some very important things that you want to do before, during, and after your exercise. And this especially applies as we age, because as we age, there's so many different illnesses that are connected with aging. Exercise seems to be one of the best things to counter that. In fact, I mentioned this in another video. The lack of exercise or activity actually causes some of these illnesses. And one of the real big things that exercise can do is increase your mitochondria. Now, mitochondria is the energy factory of the cell. It's the thing that converts food into energy as well as the raw materials to build body tissue. And exercise directly increases the number of mitochondria. And that's important because so many diseases are related to mitochondrial dysfunction, including cancer. So, anything you can do to improve the mitochondria, the better it's going to be for your health. Now, I just want to mention something called stem cells. When you exercise, you increase your stem cells. They're cells that are not really anything yet. They're kind of potential body tissue. So they can turn into anything that you need, like joint tissue or pancreas tissue or your liver or anything. And when we get older, our stem cells go down. But exercise can help rejuvenate a lot of your stem cells. So if you're not exercising, you need to start and being consistent, especially as you age. Also, exercise is one of the best things to reduce stress because we all experience stress. We want to keep the stress very low. If you don't exercise, you're going to find that your stress levels go up. Exercise will also help sleep, blood sugars. There's just many, many benefits. So, the first point about exercise I want to bring up is the four variables to exercise. Really, exercise consists of four things. One is the duration of exercise, how long you go. Two is the intensity of your exercise. Three is the recovery after the exercise. And four is just the frequency of how many times you do that for a given workout or how many workouts you do for a given week. So, all the different types of exercises that are out there are really just a combination of these four things. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the recovery, okay? The rest. Not necessarily just between the workouts, like how many times you go per week, but how long do you rest between your actual sets. So let's say, for example, you do like 8 reps of a certain exercise, which kind of makes up what's called a set. Now, how long do you rest between these sets? A lot of people, when they do the high intensity interval training, spend like 30 seconds resting. Let me tell you the problem with that. One is that you don't give your body a chance to replenish the ATP. So if you only rest for 30 seconds and then you go right into the next exercise without that full ATP or energy to supply the muscle, you're not going to be able to train at that maximum output that you would if you rested a little bit longer. And this could inhibit your progress, especially if you're training for something like sprinting or some type of high intensity sport. 30-second rest is not going to be enough. You're not going to replenish your ATP. The best thing to do, especially if you're doing this high intensity interval training, to rest like 4 to 5 minutes between these sets. That'll give your body a chance to replenish the ATP and be able to train for more maximum power. Because also the intensity is really the key with exercise. The more intense, the more growth hormone, the more muscle activation. So it's much smarter to focus on the intensity and less reps and maybe more sets than bring your intensity down because you're too tired and then try to do like a lot of reps because now you have to lower the weight and then you do less sets. So more rest between the sets, lower reps, high intensity. Also, a lot of the benefit from this exercise, especially high intensity, occurs 1 to 2 days later when you're sleeping. You're creating all this damage with the muscle, and then in the repair process, your body becomes stronger because it's adapting to that stress. And let me just touch a little bit more on this high intensity interval training. So let's say, for example, you do some type of exercise to get your pulse rate really, really high, right? So let's say it's sprinting. You're sprinting as fast as you can for 10 seconds, and your pulse rate comes all the way up to, I don't know, maybe 160, 170 or higher. What's causing that to go higher is the sympathetic nervous system. At the point where you're done sprinting, whether it's sprinting or maybe even running up the stairs, you're now going to rest. And a lot of people do what's called active recovery, which they maybe walk in place or they're doing some type of exercise where they're still exercising, but not as a higher intensity. And that might work for some people if you're maybe doing sprinting and walking, but a much better idea would be to come to a full stop after the sprint. So, why would a full stop be better than this active recovery? Well, because when you stop working out after a high intense type of activity, your pulse rate is going to come down, right? What's causing the pulse rate to come down is something called the parasympathetic nervous system. It kind of opposes this sympathetic response. So the sympathetic is raising your pulse rate, that parasympathetic is actively pushing that pulse rate down, much similar to when you pump the brakes after you're going fast in your car. You pump the brakes, you let off the gas. Now we're pumping the brakes. The parasympathetic come in there and actually push your pulse rate down. So when you come to a full stop and you're not exercising and you're sitting there, your body is exercising the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is a kind of a subtle thing, but an important thing to do if you want to exercise and make stronger your recovery. And the reason I know about this is in practice, I had something called a heart rate variability testing unit, and I would measure the recovery after exercise. And those people who did this, where they basically came to a full stop, started to show stronger parasympathetic nervous system control over time. And also remember that the vagus nerve is part of that parasympathetic nervous system. That's the main nerve that controls a lot of the digestive system, the heart, and many of the organs in your abdomen area. And a strong parasympathetic nervous system will help you sleep at night, help you recover, especially after exercise. The next thing I want to bring up is something called contrast therapy, where after an exercise, you either take a cold shower, okay, and then you maybe take a hot shower, or you can do an ice bath and a sauna or a whirlpool. Now, there's a lot of data to show that that really helps recovery and repair, and it speeds up the rejuvenation process of that muscle damage, decreasing the inflammation and just decreasing the time it takes to repair. Now, I've been experimenting with this, and I found that I'm getting a lot of recovery after I do this cold water immersion. I have this unit that I jump into. I use this after the workout. It seems to be working very, very well. I have not added the heat therapy after that, but I'm going to experiment with that at some point. But if you can add cold after the exercise or even heat, whether it's a shower, sauna, whirlpool, you can increase more benefits, especially if you're someone like me that tends to have more genetics leaning towards inflammation. And that's been my problem even in sports is that I have to be very careful of overtraining. And I also have to put a lot of it more attention on recovery between the exercise. And of course, I didn't know this when I was in sports. And so I just work out a couple times a day, 7 days a week. Big mistake because at the end of the wrestling season, I could barely walk. The other thing I want to mention about this topic is you have muscle contraction and you have muscle relaxation. Okay. And the motions that shorten the muscle are called contractions or concentric motions. They're shortening the muscle. When you elongate the muscle, that's called eccentric motion. For example, if I'm going to do a pull up, I bring my chin over the bar. Okay. When I let myself down, I elongate the muscle. That's called eccentric motion. Or, for example, let's say I do a push up and then I let myself down slowly. That's also called eccentric motion. And sometimes we forget about that because maybe we do this push up where we're pushing hard and then letting ourselves passively go down, or do a pull up, we're pulling hard and then very quickly letting ourselves go down the other direction. If you focus on the eccentric motions, you will get a lot more benefits from that workout. That can be related to doing bench press or any type of exercise. Focus on the negative motion, elongation of that muscle, and you'll have stronger muscles, better recovery, bigger muscles, faster muscles, and even delayed soreness because you're adding more force to that muscle. And it's also a good way to progress. For example, A lot of times people can't do more than a few pull-ups, right? If you were to get some type of step stool and stand on the step stool and help your body lift up with that pull-up and then focus on slowly letting yourself down the eccentric muscles, and you do that, after a while, probably 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to find that you're going to be able to do way more pull ups because you worked on the reverse motion of that. Next topic is about carbohydrates. If you do a workout and you do a little snack before, during, or after the workout, like a lot of people do, they want to get those carbs in there. Maybe they do a protein bar with sugar, or they might do an energy drink, Gatorade with sugar. You're shutting down the benefits of, ketosis, fat burning, as well as autophagy, which is the recycling of old damaged proteins in your body, the kind of the anti-aging effect. So here you are spending all this energy doing this workout, and then this little bit of carb pretty much just nullifies the benefits, especially if you are trying to lose weight around the midsection. It's very beneficial to build up to the point where you exercise in a fasting state. Maybe eat the next hour or hour and a half or 2 hours later. That would actually give you more improvements. Now, that being said, when we're dealing with hormones, insulin always comes up when people work out. And we're told that insulin will help, it's an anabolic hormone, it helps build up muscle. The research is mixed on that. Kind of some studies it says it does, other studies it says it doesn't. But I do know that it does affect the muscle and the ability for proteins or amino acids to go in the muscle, and it preserves the muscle from losing protein. So, what do we want to do? Do we want to increase insulin or not? Well, when someone's a diabetic or they consume a lot of carbs, they have insulin resistance. And when you have insulin resistance, you actually have a deficiency of insulin. This is why, like, even diabetics have more muscle loss, or people with insulin resistance, they have a hard time building their muscle. So what they've been told is like, oh, you just need to increase your carbs so you can increase insulin and build up more muscle. I wouldn't recommend that. What I would recommend is when you do the ketogenic diet, which is a low carb diet, bring your carbs up to 50 grams. And the type of carbs that you could do to fulfill that would be berries. So, like 3 cups of berries per day would give you 50 grams of carbs. And maybe if you're younger, you can go a little bit higher than that, maybe up to 75. And the other thing to know about insulin is that you can also increase insulin by eating protein. Like, even if you had 20 grams of protein in a meal, you would still raise insulin to some degree. Not as strong as carbs, but you'll increase it. So you'll have more insulin and you don't have to worry about increasing or adding sugar to it. But protein does increase insulin, but it also increases the opposing hormone called glucagon, which also helps fat burning and helps with muscle building. I also recommend adding in an electrolyte powder or more electrolytes because potassium, magnesium, calcium, chlorides, these are really important in the muscle contraction and relaxation and the power of the nervous system as well as the muscle. You're going to find if you have sufficient electrolytes, you'll have stronger muscles and you'll be more hydrated as well. But don't forget about the electrolyte sodium. The other point I want to bring up is when you eat that meal after you work out, maybe 1 to 2, even 3 hours later, what should that meal be? Well, the most important thing to talk about is protein, okay? And there's a lot to this topic, but I'm just going to give you the summary of it. The absolute best protein for muscle growth, repair, exercise is red meat. Okay. You can do that in hamburger or steak or whatever. You can do also lamb, which is a red meat, or other types of red meat. Why is red meat so important? Not only does it have more concentrated amino acids and bioavailable amino acids than chicken, especially, than plant based proteins, which are very insufficient, but red meat is kind of what you're trying to build. You're trying to build your own red meat. And so you're going to get a really good smorgasbord of all the factors that come along with building muscle, repair of muscle, and giving energy to the muscle. So we have something called carnitine, and carnitine is kind of like a little shuttle bus that takes fat and it pushes it into the motor or the mitochondria, the energy factory. It allows you to burn more fat. That's carnitine, and that's in red meat in high amounts. Then we have creatine. What does that do? That gives your muscles the fuel for high intense burst of exercise. And it just so happens that red meat is loaded with creatine. Then we have another one called carnosine. That's in red meat. And that it can act as an antioxidant to buffer some of the lactic acid, the acidity that's generated when you exercise. So that can actually increase your performance, increase your longevity, allow you to work out longer. But that's not all. Red meat also has all the cofactors, and I'm talking about like iron, the B vitamins that are necessary to allow these amino acids to work. You see, if you just consume like whey protein powder, you don't get the cofactors. You don't get the vitamins and minerals that allow that protein to be metabolized like you would if you had red meat. I mean, just think about this for a second. Inside your muscles, okay, what generates the energy is the mitochondria. I don't know if you've ever taken biochemistry before, but even if you have, most people still are confused on what this Krebs cycle is all about. The Krebs cycle is like an assembly line of little things that occur inside the cells, inside the mitochondria. And your body's taking this food and transforming it into energy as ATP storage. And it's turning food into the building blocks so you can build up body tissue and body chemistry. So that's simply what the Krebs cycle is. But what a lot of people don't know is when you go through the different points or stages on this assembly line, you need certain nutrients for that to work. If you are low in these certain nutrients, you get a bottleneck. It just stops working. And that's going to affect the Krebs cycle. And that's going to back up your energy and your biochemistry of someplace which is occurring somewhere in the body. And there's actually a way to test it, which I'm going to do some videos about. But the point is, you want this entire assembly line to be free flowing without any micronutrients missing. And I'm talking about iron, B1, B2, B3, B6, B5, about magnesium. I'm talking about manganese and another nutrient called coenzyme Q10, right? That's in the mitochondria as well. Well, guess what? When you have red meat, you don't have to worry about it. It's all in there. If you have a high quality, like grass fed beef or hamburger, whatever, all of those cofactors, everything I talked about is in a package. It's inside there. You have everything you need to build muscle and repair the muscle. So these people that are cutting out red meat, they're maybe doing chicken breast, which has way too many omega-6 fatty acids, and it's definitely of lesser quality. And so is like plant-based protein. That's like really low on the list. Whereas sometimes people think those are clean proteins to help you. They're not. There's other things you can do too. You can do eggs, and those are good. But if you do eggs, make sure they're not raw because the raw can deplete your biotin and it's not nearly as bioavailable as the cooked eggs. Another protein that's not bad is a real good high quality cheese. Okay. Think about it. Where does cheese come from? It comes from milk. In nature, when does an animal need milk? When they're growing. Why? Because milk has a lot of growth factors to help muscle building. And so a little bit of cheese can do wonders on your muscles for growth and increasing muscle size. Just don't do the low quality cheeses. If you can find a European cheese that's literally raw, that would be the best. And another thing about cheese is it's fermented, so it has the additional benefits of the microbes. And it's better than whey protein because whey protein is a different type of protein and it's like purified. So it's kind of a refined protein product. One last thing about red meat, don't get the lean. I mean, if it comes lean because the animal is lean, that's fine. But don't try to have some type of animal protein that they've taken away the fat because, again, that's refining the process. Grass fed beef would be the best, but just don't try to get the leanest version. But again, it's hard to fatten these grass fed animals because they're not feeding them grains. Well, that's fine. But people are tend to obsessing with this low fat or lean this and lean that. Even if you have chicken, at least make sure it has the skin on it. Or if you have fish, it'd be a little bit better if you have the skin on it. Another point I want to talk about is the recovery in between the workouts. So let's say you exercise and you get sore. If you're sore, you should not exercise over that soreness. Let your body recover. And sometimes it might take more than a day or 2 or 3 or even 4 days. And instead, focus on your sleep. But I just want to make one little point about the sleep. If you are an athlete and you work out hard, okay, One trace mineral that usually shows up low in athletes is copper, and that can lessen your ability to sleep, especially the REM sleep. So if you're an athlete and you're finding that you can't get the 7 or 7.5 or 8 hours, add a little copper before bed to your diet. Not a lot, just a little bit, and watch what happens. It might just enhance your sleep. You don't have to do it for a long period of time, maybe for a couple of weeks, but the point is that that exercise is depleting your copper, and you need to know how to get more copper from the diet. Now, I've given you a lot of tips of what to do to optimize your workouts before, during, and after a workout. But there's some really interesting information relating to this red meat and what's in a red meat that can help you recover from exercise. And I put that video up right here. Check it out.